A strange young boy discovers a pit in the woods housing a number of humanoid-looking creatures. Sound cool? Good, because I'm talking about The Pit from 1981. So, The Pit is a Canadian film, which, like I did, you'll likely notice as you're watching, all, with all the Canadianisms and the actors, although it was filmed in Wisconsin. Wisconsin. Sorry, that's my best Wisconsin accent. It's funny, all these American movies that were shot in Canada to save money, turns out we could have been using Wisconsin all along. It was directed by Lew Lehman and was oddly enough his only directing credit in his career. He had mostly been a writer, actor, and music supervisor, so one of those situations. My only guess is that directing just wasn't for him. So the pit centers around Jamie. He's 12 years old, incredibly bright, but definitely strange. And nobody really understands him. His parents certainly don't. He doesn't have any friends and is picked on and generally disliked by just about everyone in town. And he has a stuffed bear that he calls Teddy, who he talks to frequently, and it also talks back to him. It's never laid out clearly if Teddy can actually talk to him or if something is wrong with Jamie, but you'll get the idea that it's, probably the latter. And since he has no friends, he does what a bored 12-year-old boy does, which is wander around looking for things to do. He lives in a small rural town, and I can tell you that it looks pretty boring, but there's always the woods, right? After exploring out there for what seems like not really that long and not all that far away from his house, he finds a strange, deep pit. And not just any odd, misplaced pit, but one that has these, humanoid, kind of monstrous-looking creatures living in it that somehow can't get out. I know a lot of this sounds stupid, but damn it, they somehow make it work. Jamie considers them his friends, and aside from Teddy, his only friends. Meanwhile, at home, his parents have to go away on a business trip, something Jamie is very used to. And as usual, they hire someone to take care of him while they're away. You get the impression that in the past, nobody ever wanted to return for this job. The kid's a handful, and you do feel bad for him, but you also kind of don't, because he does some fucked up things. His parents end up hiring Sandy, a young psychology student. She is cute and adorable, and Jamie quickly develops an obsession with her. He also does things with other women in town, like stalking them and taking pictures, and this is some young Jeffrey Dahmer type stuff. He tells Sandy about the creatures in the woods, but she doesn't really believe him. He calls them trogs after doing some research. He believes they are troglodytes lost to time, existing after all these years. You don't see them a lot, which really works in the film's favor. So Jamie decides to start taking care of the trogs, and he steals money from Sandy to buy meat for them. When she's on to him, he needs a new plan now that money isn't available. Teddy gives him an idea. How about feeding them people? Especially people who have been mean to Jamie. And like I said, this all probably sounds a bit ridiculous, even for 1981. And it is. It's ridiculous. And it all just works. It's competently directed, the acting is solid, and it's an 80s horror film. But the concept is original enough to be kind of a breath of fresh air. It's pretty dark and fairly edgy. There was actually a novel published in 1980 written by John Galt titled Teddy. And from what I've heard and read, it's much closer to the original screenplay, which is far darker in tone. Apparently the screenplay was a bit different, and the writer was not pleased with the film at all. He had instead written Jamie to be 8 or 9 years old, and the trog creatures were not real but just inside Jamie's head. This, of course, would have made for a much different film, something much more psychological, and I could see how that would have made things, much, much darker. Maybe I'll check out the book someday. Hell, I'm pretty intrigued. The Pit is a very decent film, though. I'd recommend it to really any horror fan. It's a bit of a cult classic these days, with Kino Lorber putting out the DVD and Blu-ray. It seemed to have flopped pretty dramatically in theaters, but I don't know the circumstances for the time. I do think it deserves better than a 39% on Rotten Tomatoes, but its 5.7 IMDb score is probably more accurate. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Check it out if you're into 80s low-budget indie horror and you want something just a little different. Cheers, guys.